Now, we have a really interesting, one of my highlights of the day today with our Escape of Cards theme and focus on politics, and this being an election year. I am delighted to invite up Michael Slaby of Timshel to join me on stage.
Thanks.
Hey, how are you?
I'm great.
So, I figured the audience may not know you by your Timshel
Probably not.
logo, but I'm pretty sure they recognize these other ones.
Probably.
Tim was the digital technology mastermind behind the Obama campaigns of 08, 12, and can you say, well, I put the logo up already. You're working for HRC?
We're helping them out. Yeah.
Get it, okay. And obviously, there's been, Tim,
Michael.
Tim, right, yeah, Timshel.
Yeah.
Michael. A lot of...
It's been a long day.
It's been a long day.
There are a lot of people in this room.
There's a lot of mystique around the Obama campaign.
Yeah.
In many ways, it's seen as this groundbreaking, totally innovative digital strategy that obviously worked. We put a black man in the White House. It's like bully for that. What's behind it? What's the
Sure. The mythology is a little bit overwhelming. Everything from Mike Sands pointing to me and saying that guy got Obama elected, which is like not true. Although I should probably say that after I'm done talking. People are going to like leave the room. There are some amazing things to learn from the things that we did. We were the first thing to say to level set is a quote that Chris Sacca says a lot, which is timing has a lot to do with the success of a rain dance. Okay, it always takes a second. We think about the timing of 2007 and when that campaign first started. Twitter had 50,000 users. Facebook had been open to non-EDU addresses for a year, 18 months maybe. Mm-hmm. The world was pretty different, and there were a lot of firsts that were happening in the sort of convergence of technology and media that gave us opportunities to try some new things. One of the keys about us doing that and us building a culture of innovation and digital engagement and some of these new ideas was we were not driven by virtue, right? We didn't sit down in a room and go, we need to be innovative, right? Innovation wasn't a goal. Novelty is not a goal for a mission-driven organization. We were driven towards innovation by political desperation, right? We were going to lose a traditional primary. Right? Back in 07, then Senator Obama, with the funny name from Illinois that no one had ever heard of, was going to lose a traditional primary to either Senator Edwards or Senator Clinton. And so we needed to fundamentally change the nature of the contest we were having. That meant engaging people in new ways. And so we stumbled into a mentality and a cultural internally about how to empower people to engage in a new way. And what that need combined with what was happening in media and technology, we stumbled into an understanding about community building as the foundation for communications, right? And about the idea of a ladder of engagement, the idea of understanding people as people, right? Even what the market share guys were talking about, and this came up in the ad tech MarTech conversation too, is it turns out it's really hard to see people as people. We have a tendency to see people through a departmental lens, and that usually means a channel lens. Mm-hmm. The reality, though, is that we live in a world that is more network than channel, right? We live in a world that is more accurately described as a graph, not just social, everything as a graph. That means that all these channels are the edges that connect the nodes. That means we just need new metaphors for how we engage people, and that perspective is something that I think is super portable, right, into the way we think about telling stories, the way that nonprofits think about inspiring community, the way that new campaigns think about what's coming next and how to make sense of the just avalanche of new opportunities and new ideas that organizations that are all resource constrained, as big as they are, need to optimize around a very specific outcome, right? When we're talking about politics, we have the advantage of an analytical environment that is actually really simple, right? And we get maybe more credit than we deserve for on the analytics side because of the nature of the landscape, right? We have a binary outcome on a specific date measured in a unit of measurement that everyone already agrees to, right? Does that describe anybody's day job?
Yeah, none.
No, right? But what that gives us that is important and animating is a clarity of purpose. right? We know what success looks like. There is no debate about what success like. It means more votes than the other guy on election day. It means inauguration. And that gives the organization a clarity of purpose that is super powerful, right? And a filter for questions like someone comes to your table and says, we want to try X. How does that help us win? Right? And we have this animating idea about what winning looks like that is very, very clear. And it's something that you can find in other contexts. It's just harder to define.
So we talked this morning about advertising moving up the sort of the performance scale towards business outcomes. This is, or forget just outcomes, right? This is the ultimate outcome-based, campaign strategy.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. Everything needs to filter through a process of inputs, outputs, outcomes, impact, right? And I spend a lot of time now in the social impact community thinking about how these kinds of technologies apply to things like the refugee crisis and hunger and public health. And it is much easier to optimize around inputs and outputs, right? These are things that are within our control. We can see them. But the downstream effects of that, what collection of inputs and outputs leads to the outcomes and impact that you care about is where we ought to be optimizing all organizations, right? We ought to be, every organization has a mission. It's not always an election, it's not always eradicating a disease, but there is a set of beliefs about who we are and what we value that come together with a mission that leads to strategy and tactics, right? Value, mission, strategy, tactics, in that order. We have a tendency to focus on tactics, especially this conversation around digital and politics. How does Twitter lead to donations? What about these kinds? And I love those conversations. It's what I did for a decade, inside politics, trying to figure out how the tactics fit together in service of a strategy that's in service of a mission.
I gotta imagine you do a lot of experimentation, try different strategies. Let's stick with '08 for a second. What was whether it was the tactic, the platform, the thing that surprised you the most in terms of getting bang for the buck?
Turns out Twitter's a thing. That was a big surprise. I'm serious.
In '08, that was a new thing.
Scott Goodstein, who was our head of mobile and social at the time, came to my desk and said, Twitter. And I said, get the fuck out of here. Nobody wants this many text messages. There's no way people want, because back then there was no web client, everything was SMS based. And I was like, there is no way. He's like, it's free. I was like, okay, you can try it. and the lesson here is really hire people who are smarter than you about the stuff that you're trying to do. Because Scott was right? This created a different kind of relationship. It is a bi-directional edge. It is a way of having conversation. It demands of organizations a capacity to listen that we don't naturally have, right? But that creates deeper relationships over time. It is just one of the many edges between us and, say, a volunteer, right? But it was something that we didn't know how to listen as an institution other than polling, right? And that's something we can have a whole debate about the nature and quality of polling and sampling and the methodologies around that and what that tells us about politics. But this created an opportunity to do some of that learning in real time and empowering our community to take actions in service of our mission that was a much faster loop in terms of learn, listen, attempt, that gave us a lot of confidence as we started to try new things. That fast feedback loop was super valuable.
So, it'd be hard to imagine, right, a viable political candidate now without a big Twitter following, or at least a campaign. So a lot happened in technology from '08 to '12. How different were your tactics and strategies in 12 than 8? And by the way, keep it going to 16.
Sure. So if the real innovation of '08 was the rise of digital as a strategic pillar of an organization, right? There was a key decision that happened super early on where the digital director, Joe Rospars, who was my first boss on the campaign before I became the CTO, Joe reported directly to the campaign manager. And this was a structural decision that meant that digital was now part of everything. Digital was not part of communications. Digital was not about emailing press releases to people on our email list, right? As if everyone on the email list is a reporter, all right? That's not a good email strategy. But when you're subservient to communications, all of the digital sort of energy goes toward narrative, storytelling, message, right? Campaigns are about 3 things: money, message, and mobilization, right? digital is a layer, a force multiplier for doing all of these things at greater scale, with greater reach, all these kinds of opportunities. But that structural decision elevated digital to become part of the way the campaign engages in all these dimensions. In 2012, at the end of 2008, we started experimenting with cloud computing. Right, 2012, it's now like the foundation for the internet.
Right.
Right. This allowed a couple of things to happen. Is we could now build our own solutions to problems. In '08, I was the CTO. We were about bubblegum and baling wire. If I couldn't do it in an all-nighter, I didn't want to talk about it. Right. It was just not in the concept of long-term technology development. Was not in our lexicon at all. Yep. 2012, we have this incredible gift of being an incumbent. The gift is time, right? Building technology, solving technology, platform kinds of problems takes time to engineer. But we were able to look back at what worked and what didn't and say, if we could engineer solutions to some of our problems, what would we do? So our CTO, Harper Reed, who is an startup-centric, engineering-centric CTO, came into the company and came into the campaign, and we have this new capacity for building things. Mm-hmm. We didn't build technology in '08. Right. We were proactive, experimental, madcap, like consumers of tech. In 2012, we actually started to build some of our own stuff.
You're an incubator.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
And now, 2016, what we see is what happens when you elevate engineering without elevating product is that sometimes you solve technical problems that are not strategically valuable. Right. So the 2016 campaigns, and if you look at the awesome CTO of Secretary Clinton's campaign is a woman named Stephanie Hannon, comes out of Google, strong engineering culture, but she's from product, right? She was one of the product leaders on Gmail. She's product leader on Wave. Some of these like interesting, innovative products over the last decade. She spent some time in google.org, but she comes from a product mentality. And so if it's the progression is elevation of digital, elevation of engineering, and analytics. And then the elevation of product into an organization that's much more efficient, right? Much more careful about how and where they apply these skills rather than solving technical problems that may be interesting. And there's easy ways to get in trouble with this. In 2012, we talk a lot about the integration of data. If you want to see people as people, you need to see people across all the systems because they don't give a shit about your org chart. Yep. Right? They don't care that your field department uses a volunteer management tool and your digital department uses an email marketing tool. Nobody cares, right? We got to figure it out internally. Mm-hmm. And so we need to be able to integrate data. So now we start building this whole system that there was some attention around called Narwhal, which is just about ETL and data exchange. But we decided it needed to be in real time. And we made our lives really, really, really hard. And this technology largely worked, but the number of strategic real-time decisions that were going to change based on real-time data, very, very few. Right? And if we had had a better product orientation, we would have made some different decisions. We may have built the same product, but we would have engineered it in a very different way. We would have saved a lot of time. We would have saved a lot of money. And we would have built something that was more strategically valuable to the organization because we lost sight of how does this help us win there for a minute.
So obviously each election it's a different set of challenges, and you have to sort of build different strategies and tactics to suit each one. I want to hear from you about how your approach would change depending upon different opponents. And let's just do a hypothetical. Hypothetically, you have a megalomaniacal, narcissistic demagogue.
It would never happen.
Who's a billionaire, probably a millionaire, but he calls himself a billionaire, and has caught.
He'll never survive the primary.
Right, he would never. You're right. Let's not even go there then. But let's say he did, by some fluke, survive the primary. He trumped all the other candidates, and yeah, exactly. And uses Twitter as a blunt instrument, which, for some bizarre reason, is effective on at least a segment of the population. What would you do in that hypothetical?
So I think there's a couple of things about Donald Trump that are really interesting.
Donald Trump?
Right.
Oh, okay, fine.
Just,
then
as
go
an
there.
example, he's running a national campaign, which anyone who does what I do and has spent a lot of time in presidential politics would say doesn't exist. There's no such thing as a national campaign. You run 50 state campaigns. This is not how his campaign is structured. It's not how he thinks. It's not how the organization works. It's why, by the way, he was getting his ass kicked by Senator Cruz when it came to delegate county convention stuff.
Yep.
But it turns out it didn't matter. So a lot of people who do what I do and come out of the space that I've been have been saying, including me, by the way, there's no way he can't thrive. He's declaring Donald Trump dead like over and over and over and over again over the last year. And I think it's time to step back and say, what's he doing right? And I think there is an aspect particularly to his usage of Twitter that is fascinating to me, because he takes rapid response to a whole nother level. And it's because he does it himself. There is no strategic feedback loop. There's no conversation. There's no meeting, right? He's just doing it, which, as somebody who used to work on campaigns, even with very thoughtful, intellectual candidates, sounds terrifying to me, much less in the hands of Donald Trump. But it means that he has been able to move conversations faster than his opponents by orders of magnitude, right? The next day, the other candidates are still meeting about what to do, and he's on to like the third news cycle of kicking their ass.
Right.
And they finally sort of pipe up, and their response may be right, but it's like, sometimes you're in a conversation and somebody's picking on you and you have a great idea the next day. You're like, man, I wish I'd said, that's the entire Republican field for 9 months.
Right.
If only I had had that great comeback in April.
Right.
Shit. Now, that's not helping anybody. Now we have to figure out what to do with this beast.
Is there a Michael Slaby of the Trump campaign?
So he's actually come out and said pretty publicly that he doesn't care about data, which I think is interesting, given what I do. Sure, but I also would have said that a national campaign can't work. So, I think he believes that the strategy that got him through, I believe he believes, that the strategy that got him through the primary around a nationally media-driven campaign can get him through the general, and that the sort of Dan Wagner, who was our chief analytics officer in 2012, who now runs Civis Analytics, which is a company that you guys should all know, if you haven't heard of them, sort of really pioneered this idea about individual level, sort of building into individual level models and thinking about resource allocation on an electoral basis and making business decisions about the electoral value of investing in a given state or county. I don't think his campaign cares about that question.
Right.
I think that, doing that really well, Dan, one of the things that people miss in the mythology around the campaigns is how big a team we had, how much talent, human talent was involved in doing digital and technology and analytics as well as we did. We had 300 people in headquarters whose jobs were digital strategist, content, email, technology engineer, product manager, analyst. That's a serious investment. This is a half of headquarters, and I think Donald Trump's going to spend his money somewhere else. I'm very loath now, after being embarrassingly wrong for the last year, to say, well, there's no fucking way that's going to work.
Right.
Even though that's my instinct, which, by the way, is, I think, a worry for the sort of political class and everybody's, well, he's going to lose in a landslide. That whole thought.
Still waiting for that.
Still waiting for that to happen. That whole conclusion is grounded in a set of assumptions about how the electoral map works. Right, and we may be in a world where, if you look at the Nate Silvers of the world, what they will say is, in a world where Georgia is competitive, Secretary Clinton will be winning Pennsylvania by a mile. There's no way for Georgia to be competitive. The mechanics of it. That's true based on previous understandings of the electorate.
Right.
We may live in a world where Secretary Clinton loses Ohio, Florida, and Pennsylvania, and still wins because she wins Georgia and Arizona.
Right.
What?
Wow.
It barely makes. I don't even understand. I barely understand myself.
I thought you were going to say New York and California.
Well, she's going to win those. Yeah. But I think we need to reframe what we are measuring,
Path to victory.
Because I think our understanding of what winning looks like is very different in the world we're in now versus what.
Especially if we move on from this two-party condition we're in and have been in for a long time. There was a lot of talk at the beginning of the year about an independent run. Is there a shot?
Still possible.
Could it be possible? No, not necessarily in 16, but I'm saying, how soon do you think independent?
There's talk about this every cycle.
Yeah.
And
yeah, but it's all bullshit. No?
Yeah, mostly. I think it's still possible this year. I think the clock is running out.
Yeah.
In terms of time to get on ballots, those kinds of things. I think there is still some conservative Republican energy around Senator Sass. Right. And I think he could be a guy who could lead an independent conservative challenge.
Well, that's certainly one way for the right to cast a nay vote.
And look, I think if you just look at sort of the energy around the primary, I think the concept of a Republican Party in a very different ilk than the past, led by Donald Trump, a conservative party led by someone like Senator Sass, and then a Democratic Party led by, centrist Democratic Party led by Secretary Clinton, and a liberal party led by Elizabeth Warren and Senator Warren and Senator Sanders. Yep. Like, that's not crazy. The problem is the infrastructure for a two-party system really makes it hard for anything else to happen. We don't have a concept of coalition government. We don't have, getting on the ballot is extremely difficult. It turns out party infrastructure is very, very valuable. And so while the electorate may be grouping more in a more diverse way than two parties right now, it's very hard. A lot of structural things have to change before that's possible. I think that's potentially an interesting world, but I don't know how we get from A to B.
So your mission critical is getting HRC elected. I have the winning idea for you.
Let's hear.
Right here, okay? Just came up with this. Draft Stephen Colbert to run in character. Right?
Hasn't he been doing that for like a decade now?
Yeah, I know, but he can run. He'll get. Never mind. Okay. So just finish it.
I'm worried about the Bud Light Party getting real votes. By the way, has anybody seen with Seth Rogen and Amy Schumer, all these gag ads? Someone's going to vote for that.
Listen,
like this cycle
kind
is
of makes
bananas.
Sense. Yeah, sure.
That could be
compared
like
to Cruz,
outside the margin of error write-in problems in some of these states.
Finally, can you just give us? So you've now taken all this learnings of math and data of clear objective outcomes. What are you doing at Timshel?
Timshel is about bringing the same kind of the power of digital engagement and building community at scale, the power of analytics and understanding success into the rest of the social impact landscape. So we love elections in this country. We spend a lot of money on them. But all of elections are about winning an opportunity to serve, winning an opportunity to do work in service of the American public. All the work happens after Election Day. And we struggle to leverage innovation and data and digital engagement in those contexts mightily, right? There's incredible work being done and lots of opportunity, and trying to elevate the way the social impact community functions is what we're about every day.
Awesome. Great. Michael?
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.